Mystic Path to Cosmic Power by Vernon Howard. Chapter 3. The Marvels of the Mystic Path. But is the mystic path practical for modern men and women? Nothing else is practical. You can prove it in 5 minutes. Just look around. Honestly, now what do we see? We see heartache, defeat, quarreling, illness of every sort. Is this practical? It is entirely possible for any man or woman to live above all these defeats. People also wonder how their attention to the inner life will affect their exterior affairs. They wrongly assume that their business, social and domestic activities will somehow suffer. They will do the exact opposite. They take on a brightness you cannot imagine. A new inner life always reflects itself outwardly. It is strange how people wrongly think in terms of either this or that. You don't lose one value by adding another. A man with an automobile is given a boat. Does he lose the automobile? No, he has something else, another value. Both have their place and use. The awakened man not only continues nicely with his exterior affairs, but exerts a new command over them. Because he no longer uses them to feed ego needs, he is totally free of worry. His sense of psychological survival does not depend upon this or that happening. In finding himself, he discovers a magnificent truth. He is not at the mercy of anything in this world. The man of inner life is easily aware of himself, since he is never totally absorbed in outward affairs. Therefore, his exterior occupations and necessary activities do not distract him, and he adjusts himself to things as they come. The man whose inner life is well ordered is not bothered by strange and troublesome ways of others. A man is blocked and distracted by such things only as he permits himself to be. What is more practical than this way of life, as outlined by the medieval teacher Thomas à Kempis? How good things happen to you. The time will come when you no longer try to make good things happen. They just happen. You will be astonished. You will be astonished because you now see that whatever happens to you is good. Is this as yet a mystery to you? If words could only show you. Someday you will delightfully exclaim, "So that's it." We can take a modern situation to see how an aware man improves exterior affairs. A businessman can make this experiment. Before your next telephone call or business conference, clarify its exact purpose. Write it down in a word or two on a slip of paper. Now watch what happens. Notice the useless chatter. Be aware of how few people can get to the point and be done with it. By alertness to this wastage, you can take steps to save your time and energy. It is not a question as to whether or not the mystic path is practical. A man must realize its effectiveness, so he must listen, absorb, probe, experiment. He must wake up to new possibilities. He must begin to see things as they are, not as he dreams they are. If we look out the window during a storm, we see everything through the blur of the wet glass. The trees seem out of shape, the hills dark and vague. Yet we know this is only an appearance. They seem out of shape because of our temporarily distorted vision. When the storm passes, we see things clearly, as they really are, and as they always were. Our life observation starts with a collection of blurs. In our early confusion, we think we must change the trees and hills. But, as our vision clarifies, we see that we need pay no attention to anything out there. We need only to see them as they really are. That makes them right for us. The moment a man utters his first faint yes to his true self, he begins to change his vision. It is the beginning of what all religions call the new birth. Then we really can retain an inner quietness, while actively engaged in the turmoils of exterior life. Perfect quietness. For one thing, the self-discovered man can be either a huge success in his outer affairs or a so-called dismal failure, and be completely at ease. Anyone can enter the mystical life. That's a new idea. How can a so-called failure be at ease? Follow carefully. The self-free man has an entirely different concept of success and failure. In fact, the two terms don't exist for him. If success exists for him, so must failure, which keeps him nervous. Watch what happens to you when you really grasp this. You will enjoy your worldly activities regardless of results. Have you noticed how concern with results keeps you jittery? Now that you point it out, yes. Let's explore. In your new state of thinking, you do not use your worldly activities to give you a sense of self-esteem. You already know who you are, so you don't depend upon exterior successes to make you feel good. You enjoy yourself regardless of results. You have no idea of the mountaintop feeling you possess when you no longer depend upon good results to make you feel good. I'd give anything to be unconcerned with whatever happens. Work with these ideas, and you will be that way. Anyone can enter the mystical life of inner quietness. Regardless of age, the clamors of business, the problems of his home, in spite of everything, anyone can enter. It is a matter of inner development. You carry your mind with you wherever you go. Therefore, you always have the opportunity to work with yourself. Anxiety is in the mind, so is peace. Yes, a simple self-contentment. That is a guaranteed marvel of the mystic path. You have no pressure to be anyone but whoever you are, a so-called success or a so-called failure. What a prize. Diogenes was an early exponent of the contented life, the Henry David Thoreau of his day. Great crowds trudged from distant lands to hear Diogenes declare, "You lose the very life you seek when you wallow in stupid luxuries. You don't need 9/10 of the things you scramble for. Don't be afraid to have nothing. Don't hesitate to be a nobody. Happiness is not what you have, but who you are. You are already exactly who you need to be. See it." True to his teachings, Diogenes was unimpressed by wealth and power. One day, when Alexander the Great visited Corinth, the masses flocked to hail him. Needing no hero to worship, Diogenes stayed home. "Well," said Alexander, noting the absence of the famous teacher, "I suppose I must go to him." The great warrior found the contented philosopher warming himself in the sunlight. Alexander asked the relaxed man, "What can I do for you?" "Just one thing, please," replied Diogenes. "Stand aside. You are blocking my sunlight." Mysticism is a personal experience. The mystic path is a personal experience, not a mere discussion of ideas. Who wants to hear a description of a beautiful symphony when he can feel the music for himself? No one is convinced of anything until he inwardly perceives that it is true. We can read about a spiritual precept, talk and reflect about it, but the final proof is internal witness. Then we know. If everyone else on the face of the earth disagreed, we would still stand securely upon the rock of inner illumination. For the spiritual life is as much its own proof as the natural life, and needs no outward or foreign thing to bear witness to it. William Law. Mere knowledge is not enough. It must form a foundation for personal perception. Knowledge without insight is like a horse in a library. Knowledge of spiritual facts and the experiencing of those facts alternate as we go along. We study the recipe and then bake the cake. As Alfred Tennyson phrases it, "Let knowledge grow from more to more, but more of reverence in us dwell, that mind and soul, according well, may make one music as before." Don't think that you must involve yourself with complex intellectual philosophies. Don't try to be profound or educated. That only wears you out. Just be simple. Let everyday life be your teacher. Everything is useful for self-advancement. Look for more self-insight in the little things that happen to you every day. Ask why you reacted as you did to that unexpected news. Try to understand why you replied the way you did to a question. Be aware of the disappointment you feel when a hoped-for event fails to appear. Waste nothing that happens to you. Don't resist anything, just observe it. This is exactly what the mystics do to reach the trouble-free life. Does mysticism carry us up and away? Do we sight something out of this world? Dr. Paul Brunton replies, "The only way to settle these questions is not by argument or discussion, but by getting the direct experience of divine illumination, and that is a personal thing. Each person must obtain it for himself or herself. Then only will you find out what is really meant by the kingdom of heaven. This attainment is not quite so hard as it seems to be, because you are not seeking something 100,000 miles distant. You are seeking something which is here, right here, inside yourself. You are not seeking something which is alien to you, but rather your own inmost nature, your essence. Your attractive changes. A seeker came to his teacher to complain, "Master, I am unhappy with the people in my life. They are unfaithful, inconsiderate. I am not wanted or appreciated. How can I change them? Replied the teacher, change yourself. The walk down the mystic path is towards self-change. If we reminded ourselves of this a dozen times a day, it would not be too much. We have dozens of arrows, like self-study and persistence, but we shoot them all toward the single target of inner transformation. We do not seek a mere change in human opinions. That pins us down to the same level. The conditioned mind can only rearrange human ideas of the same limited value, just as you might change a dollar bill for 10 dimes. But a gain in cosmic consciousness is like adding a block of gold to the original dollar. Mystical truths uplift your level of consciousness. When it happens, you know that it has happened. How? What curiously attractive changes they are. One sure sign is that you feel less flattered by flattery and less blamed by blame. An enlightened individual is affected by neither praise nor accusation, though he may get plenty of both from unawakened people. Another pleasant change is an entirely new feeling toward time. You feel no sense of hurry, yet you accomplish your daily tasks far more efficiently. You live in that wonderful moment mysticism calls now. In one of your books, you said that self-transformation frees us from a false sense of responsibility. Will you please describe this newness? It is the only way to live. There is a certain aimlessness, a lack of concern, but it has nothing to do with common carelessness. You realize that all that furious rushing around the deck does absolutely nothing to move the boat forward. You finally grasp the cosmic truth that the boat carries you. You don't carry the boat. You sense that your abandonment of control does not mean disaster after all, but for the first time, an enjoyable voyage. Before, you thought the boat would stop if you ceased pretending you were the captain. Now you know better. There is a real captain. How glad you are to see it. Men who have walked the mystic paths. The mystics themselves are a marvel of the path. We have defined mysticism as a sane and practical approach to the richer life, so we can define a mystic as one who, having discovered this life for himself, points the way for others. The mystic discovered this new life. He once had every pain, temptation, and confusion as other seekers had, maybe a lot more, but he heroically sought and found answers. He recognized his self-deception and stopped it. He faced the horror of his illusion-based wickedness and dissolved it. He ran into one blank wall after another, but kept going. The authentic mystic personally experiences the truth. The hypnotized man merely repeats what he has been told. The mystic hears the music within himself. The unawakened person merely plays another man's phonograph record. Can anyone become a mystic? Definitely. But please don't hold an imaginative picture of a mystic as some strange-looking individual in a long robe. An authentic mystic is a sensible man who lives in the midst of a troubled world, but is above its folly. A businessman at his desk or a homemaker at her stove can easily be a practicing mystic. Great mystics of history possessed various backgrounds and personalities. Lao Tzu was a librarian in charge of secret scrolls. René Descartes was a lawyer, army officer, author, musician, psychologist, philosopher, and a mathematical genius. The Emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, was caught between his love of the spiritual life and the demands of royalty. He wrote, "Look within. Within is your fountain of good." Pythagoras, who lived about 550 BC, used the principles of music to teach philosophic truths. Brother Lawrence, whose real name was Nicholas Herman, was a big and awkward cook in a monastery. Though ignorant of literary matters, his inner victory expressed itself in one of the great mystical classics, practicing the presence of God. Buddha was a prince who gladly gave up a kingdom in exchange for personal peace. A champion on the athletic field was named Plato. Danish mystic Søren Kierkegaard urged every man to be a rugged individualist in self-discovery. He made an amazing statement that could be said only by a man who had shattered his own false personality. I have become myself. But whatever their individualities, they agree wholeheartedly on the principles of the mystic path. 1. Man suffers because he lives under a peculiar kind of hypnosis. 2. With right effort and knowledge, he can snap the spell to live anew. It is as if you were traveling across the hot desert, stopping every so often for a drink of water. The first oasis keeper might be a rough-looking character with a no-nonsense manner who bluntly waves you toward the pool. At the next stop, you are greeted by a gentle personality who serves you with his own hands. Other oasis keepers have their own appearance and manner, but all supply you from the same underground stream of water. Such men not only liberate themselves, they fill those they meet with a free mind. Philo. The courage of the mystics. These teachers of mankind have more insight into human nature than a roomful of Sigmund Freuds. Having shed his personal ego, it no longer clouds the mystic's perception of things as they are. Most men are easily fooled by the shallow exterior manners of society. Not so the enlightened man. He sees and speaks fearlessly of man's dreadfully destructive self-deception. Human life is thus only an endless illusion. Men deceive and flatter each other. No one speaks of us in our presence as he does when we are gone. Society is based on mutual hypocrisy. This is Pascal's blunt insight. No, it is not pessimism speaking. It is the highest optimism and courage. A pessimist is one who refuses to face the fact of man's folly, including his own, because he secretly fears there is no cure. But the mystic knows that humanity's health can be regained. Consequently, he is unafraid of an honest diagnosis of the illness, seeing its necessity for the cure. I suppose we must face it. Most people stumble from one foolishness to another. Why? Whenever someone does a foolish thing, he knows it is foolish. This creates a pressure, an anxiety, a sense of guilt. In an attempt to escape the pain, he behaves rashly again, but since his inner nature remains unchanged between the two acts, the second act is also the outcome of a foolish nature. This creates another pressure, and the next foolishness. How can he break the vicious circle? By grasping all that we talk about in these classes. You have nothing to do except become an aware man or woman. Incidentally, never feel ashamed or guilty over your foolishness, which does not mean you evade your responsibility for it. It means that you don't deepen the confusion as to who did it. The false self, which is not the real you, did it. As you go through life, you often make mistakes that cause you to cry in despair. What's the matter with me? Why can't I behave normally, quietly, pleasantly? When this happens, as it does to everyone, don't fall into anguish. Use your mistakes, great or small, to see how they stem from a wrong sense of self. This gets you on the royal road once more. What you should know about mystical teachings. If the mystics denounce human folly with one voice, they offer deliverance with another. All that pains you is only yourself, for you are at enmity with yourself, declares Jacob Boehme. But from the Gospels come the gentle promise, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The persecution of those who see deeply into the human condition is a sad reflection upon man's aversion to life-liberating facts. When Dutch philosopher Benedict Spinoza refused a bribe of $500 a year in return for his silence, he was excommunicated and stabbed. Jacob Boehme, the German shoemaker of Görlitz, was denounced from the pulpit and hounded out of town by his own pastor, a self-righteous hypocrite named Gregorius Richter. Immanuel Kant's charge that Christ's teachings had been set aside in favor of church ritual brought down upon his head the wrath of King Frederick of Prussia. No one is qualified to judge a mystic except another mystic. A lower level of understanding cannot possibly evaluate a higher one. When a lower-level man tries to judge, which happens all the time, his judgment is like explaining the fruit of a tree while gazing at the trunk. A lower-level man fears those occupying the higher. The higher appears as a threat to his ego-centered concepts. We understand the person of a loftier level only when we reach that new plane for ourselves. Then, in a new humility, we smile patiently at our former foolish judgment. To be of genuine help, a teacher must constantly urge the seeker toward self-change, which alone can liberate. The seeker must not be directed solely toward good works in his exterior life, for he will mistakenly assume that they are the same as inner transformation, which they are not. It is not an easy task for the teacher, for the seeker persistently resists anything calling for the sacrifice of his frozen concepts. But the truth must be told at all costs, no matter how unpopular it may be. The authentic spiritual leader, having freed himself of his own false need to be popular, tells the truth, whether it falls on fertile or stony ground. Such a teacher is the salt of the earth, though few know it. Do men of such profound perception exist in the world today? Yes, and you can be very grateful for it. If you think the world is delirious as is, you would find it intolerable without their healing influence. What reassuring relief to sight such islands of sanity in a troubled sea. Understand this vital feature. We now come to a feature of the mind called identification. It is impossible to overestimate the value of understanding this psychological state, for it connects with everything in our lives. Identification means that we mentally and emotionally lose ourselves in something inside or outside of us. We become absorbed in a person, a place, our career, a hobby, our personal viewpoints, almost anything. We lose our thoughts in these things in an attempt to feel secure. We hope to gain an idea of who we are. We want to cling to something that seems permanent, but they give us no security. They create just the opposite. The moment we identify with anything, we become afraid of losing it. And since all things change, we get hurt when the object of our attachment is threatened or when it goes away. Identification also means wrongly to take something as being a part of our essential selves. Take your name. You are not your name. That is only a label attached at birth. If you change your name, it would not make vow any different. Take the physical body. That is merely a vehicle for living on earth. Your true self does not consist of name, body, money, home, career, a new hairdo, or your personal beliefs. You are something entirely different from these attachments, just as you are different from the clothes you put on in the morning. We can certainly have a successful career and other externals, but we must not think they are part of the essential self. Then and then only will we really enjoy our personal possessions, for we will not fear their change or loss. When we identify with our own thoughts, we call it daydreaming. We lose ourselves in thoughts about 1,000 things, a plan for achievement, a remark from someone, food, sex, money. Notice this. Whenever you daydream, nothing exists outside of that self-absorbed state. You are unaware of yourself. You are not even aware that you are daydreaming, but a moment later, when your name is called, you snap out of it to return to the world. Losing ourselves in our own thoughts blocks the entrance of higher impressions that could strengthen us. How to be free of sadness. Work with all this. One of your great gains will be freedom from the tyranny of sentimental memory. What does this mean? Watch your next arising of sadness. You will find that it connects in some way with remembrance of a past era that you consider more exciting, more romantic, or more rewarding than now. This sadness comes from the unnecessary tyranny of sentimental memory, and nothing else. The past gave us pleasure, but it is gone, and so we are sad. We want those pleasurable days back, but we know that all things change. In your new and unattached state, you are no longer at the mercy of imaginative memory. There is no longer a painful yearning for what has been, but a gentle enjoyment of what now is. Memory has its place in recording non-psychological facts, like the alphabet, but creates useless sorrow when misused in sentimental imagination. A sure way to detect harmful identification is the pendulum test. Whenever we identify with anything we think is exciting, we sooner or later swing back to the opposite feeling of boredom. Identification with excitement is always followed by an unhappy reaction. Mrs. Jones has great fun at the party. Next morning she feels depressed. Mr. Jones beams with joy over a big financial success. Next day he despairingly wonders whether the only value in life is one financial success after another. All this is not negative. It presents you with a wonderful opportunity to find lasting values in self-liberty. By ceasing to place our trust in anything outside our true self, we cannot possibly be afraid of anything. This is the secret behind the mystical teaching that the man who has nothing has everything. Marvelous rewards come to the non-attached man or woman. The boss may still be a tyrant, but no longer has he power to bother you. An irritating relative may be just as unbearable, but you are free of him. You, in your new role of a detached observer, are aware of everything but affected by nothing. We have already seen that man's main identification is with his false self, his ego self. He is not this counterfeit man, but his belief in it creates chaos. If man is not his false self, who is he? He is his true self, which is a point of awareness, which is an observer of all that happens. That is what is permanent and eternal in man. All this explains why mysticism urges us to detach ourselves mentally. Lean on nothing outside your own spiritual self. Detachment never takes away anything beneficial, only the harmful. How to walk the mystic path. Learning to walk confidently is largely an unlearning process. We must cease to accept the false as true. The degree of inharmony in our lives is the sure test as to the number of counterfeit coins we are taking as real. Increased consciousness gives us silver, not lead. We cannot learn what is right if we secretly insist that we already know it. Now, this statement seems quite obvious. A man would quickly agree with it. Yet there is something drastically wrong somewhere. If a man truly sees that he does not know rightness, his very emptiness leaves room for it, which changes the man into a freer state. If a man does not change, it means just one thing. He fearfully clings to the false assumption that he already knows rightness, which blocks entrance of genuine rightness. Do not be afraid of your emptiness. It is not what you think it is. Do not give it false power by resisting it. Let it be there. Let it be there if it wants, and you will see through a painful hoax played upon you. And then you will know something entirely new. Think of yourself as erasing a mental blackboard. If we try to write new sentences over the old, it becomes unintelligible. We must erase first. Then we write with clear wisdom. Eagerness to learn indicates an individual's insight into his present helplessness. As stinging to the pride as it may be for the moment, he is on his way at last. Mystical learning consists of more self-insight. Augustine received a flash of self-discernment while walking down a street in Milan, Italy. He saw a poor wanderer who was laughing and joking. Augustine reported, "And in truth he was joyous, I anxious, he free from care, I full of alarms." Augustine painfully perceived that in spite of all his education and public honor, he was far from possessing personal peace, the very peace he had urged others to find. But his honest appraisal changed things in his favor. One interesting feature of mystical progress is that you take the whole business less and less grimly. At the start, a man is deeply serious because he has not as yet found any answers to his questions and wonders whether he ever will. But with the dawning of light, he becomes cheerfully relaxed. Having caught sight of the harbor, he sails eagerly but restfully on. Foremost features to remember. 1. Mystical truths make your life practical in an inspiringly new way. 2. Anyone can have the self-contented life. Sincere search is always rewarded. 3. Go beyond words. Make mysticism your personal experience. 4. Use every event as a source of self-understanding and self-advancement. 5. Self-change is a marvel of the mystic path. 6. The great mystics, having walked the path successfully, now aid your journey forward. 7. Remember that while exterior good works are commendable, they are not the same thing as inner transformation. 8. Spend extra time in studying the subject of identification. Then don't identify. 9. Lean on nothing outside your true self. 10. Walk the mystic path with relaxed good cheer.